Good afternoon, everyone. Everything coming out of this practice should be viewed with the proper perspective, because while there were some frustrating moments for the offense, there were also several important signs that explain why the coaching staff is staying patient instead of overreacting. The biggest takeaway from the first padded practice is that this offense clearly had a difficult day. There were dropped passes from multiple receivers, procedural penalties before the snap, and several drives that simply failed to find any rhythm. Whether the team was working in goal line situations or trying to move the football consistently, the execution just wasn't where it needs to be. Naturally, when fans hear about an offense struggling in training camp, concerns immediately begin to grow. But there are several reasons why this performance deserves a much deeper look before anyone starts sounding the alarm. First of all, this team is still extremely early in the learning process. The offense is operating within a completely new system, and every new scheme comes with growing pains. Players are still learning timing, responsibilities, alignments, and the small details that eventually become automatic during the regular season. Training camp exists for exactly this purpose. It is where mistakes happen, corrections are made, and chemistry slowly develops. Nobody wants to see sloppy football, but this is also the period where those mistakes are expected to happen, so they do not appear once games actually begin to count. Another factor that made life much more difficult for the offense was the personnel available during practice. Jalen was not surrounded by the full starting unit. In fact, at different moments he was operating behind what was essentially a backup offensive line. With Lane Johnson absent for excused non-injury reasons, Marquise Bell handled the starting right tackle duties. That alone changes the dynamics of the offense, especially when the offensive line is one of the biggest strengths of this football team. The situation at the skill positions also forced adjustments across the roster. Saquon, Barkley, and Dallas Goedert were among the few regular starters available, while other players had to move into much larger roles than originally expected. Dantavian Wicks found himself operating as the #1 receiver throughout portions of practice because of injuries affecting the receiving group. Whenever multiple starters are unavailable simultaneously, it naturally changes the rhythm of the offense and forces quarterbacks to develop chemistry with different combinations of players. The injury report became one of the biggest stories from the day. Devonta Smith missed practice because of a hamstring injury, although he remained present while watching the workout. Even more concerning was My Lemon, who once again was sidelined with a hamstring injury after already dealing with one during the spring. Whether this is connected to the previous issue or not, seeing another soft tissue injury is certainly something worth monitoring closely. The Eagles invested heavily in Lemon after moving up to draft him, and following the departure of A.J. Brown, the expectation is that he will play a significant role during the 2026 season. Repeated hamstring problems are never ideal because they have a tendency to linger and can easily return if not fully resolved. The injury concerns did not stop there. Britton Covey left practice during the session, meaning the Eagles were temporarily missing 3 wide receivers. Cooper DeJean also exited with an arm injury before trainers evaluated him. Fortunately, he appeared to be okay afterward, but any injury involving one of the defense's most important players immediately captures everyone's attention. Despite all of these obstacles, the coaching staff continues emphasizing the process rather than immediate results. Quarterbacks coach Sean Mannion explained that the priorities remain consistent every single day. The focus is on maximum effort, competition, proper assignments, clean alignments, and eliminating mental mistakes. Those fundamentals matter much more during the early stages of camp than winning every individual drill. According to Mannion, progress has already been visible through the first practices, even if there is still plenty of work remaining. One important detail that should not be overlooked is the quality of the defense lining up against this offense every single day. Philadelphia is not installing a brand new offensive system against an average defense. They are testing it against one of the NFL's strongest defensive units. That creates a much steeper learning curve, but it can also accelerate development. Every successful play has to be earned, every mistake is exposed immediately, and every correction becomes more valuable because of the level of competition across the line of scrimmage. That is why today's struggles should probably be viewed as part of a much larger picture, instead of a final evaluation of where this offense stands. The mistakes were real, the execution needs improvement, the penalties have to disappear. disappear, but there are understandable explanations behind many of those issues, from injuries to lineup changes to the challenges of installing an entirely new offensive philosophy against an elite defense. The next few practices will become extremely important because this offense now has an opportunity to respond. Can the receivers clean up the drops? Will the procedural mistakes decrease? Can the injured players begin returning to the field and restore continuity? Those answers will tell us much more about the direction of this team than one difficult practice ever could. What do you think, Eagles fans? Are you staying patient because it's still early in training camp, or do today's offensive struggles already have you concerned about the direction of this new offense? Even with all of the adversity surrounding the offense, there were still several encouraging developments that stood out during practice, and some of them could become extremely important once the regular season begins. One of the biggest positives continues to be Jalen Hurts' willingness to embrace elements of this new offensive system that simply were not major parts of his game before. Throughout training camp, he has spent more time operating from under center, and he has also shown a greater willingness to attack the middle of the field. Those are two areas where progress has reportedly been noticeable, and every successful repetition builds more confidence as this offense continues to evolve. Another encouraging sign has been the connection developing between Hurts and newly acquired wide receiver Dontavian Wicks. With injuries forcing several receivers off the field, Wicks has received significantly more opportunities, and he has taken advantage of them. Once again, he delivered multiple big plays during practice, continuing what has already been a very productive training camp. Whenever a receiver consistently earns trust from his quarterback during camp, it becomes something worth watching because chemistry cannot be manufactured overnight. It develops through repetitions, and Wicks appears to be making the most of every opportunity being presented to him. There is also another player who continues generating excitement every time he steps onto the practice field. Darius Cooper keeps making some of the most impressive plays of training camp, and this is no longer looking like a temporary hot streak. According to everything that has been observed throughout camp, Cooper is continuing the momentum he built last year during training camp and the preseason. Instead of slowing down entering his second season, he has continued stacking impressive performances. If that trend continues, the Eagles coaching staff could eventually find themselves facing a very good problem figuring out how to get him onto the field because his production is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Perhaps one of the most important observations coming from camp has less to do with individual players and more to do with the offensive system itself. While the scheme has clearly presented challenges, there are already signs that it has the potential to improve several areas that struggled last season. The running game could benefit significantly if everything comes together. The offensive line also appears positioned for a stronger year, especially with healthier personnel returning to the lineup. Landon Dickerson has reportedly lost weight, is healthy, and has looked sharp throughout camp. Cam Jurgens also appears healthier after dealing with the effects of back surgery during the previous season. If those improvements continue and the offensive line returns to performing at one of the highest levels in football, the impact extends far beyond just protecting the quarterback. A dominant offensive line creates opportunities for the running game, improves pass protection, helps establish offensive rhythm, and ultimately makes life easier for every player on the field. Everything within an offense starts up front, and Philadelphia understands that as well as any organization in the league. While much of the attention entering camp centered on the offense, another storyline has quietly developed on the defensive side of the football. Before training camp began, safety appeared to be one of the biggest question marks on the roster. It seemed entirely possible that the Eagles could eventually explore outside additions if the position failed to impress. Instead, the exact opposite has happened so far. The safety group has become one of the pleasant surprises of training camp. Andrew Makuba has performed well entering his second season, continuing to show encouraging development. Veteran Marcus Epps has provided steady, reliable play, bringing experience and consistency to the secondary. Michael Carter II also made an impact by recording an interception during practice while demonstrating valuable versatility. His ability to contribute both inside as a slot defender and at safety gives the coaching staff additional flexibility, something that becomes incredibly valuable over the course of a long season. Even with Cole Wisniewski missing recent practices because of injury, the Eagles appear to have quality depth at the position. Having multiple players perform well simultaneously changes the outlook of the entire group and could reduce what many initially viewed as one of the roster's biggest concerns. Competition at quarterback behind Hurts has also remained intense. Andy Dalton and Tanner McKee continue battling throughout camp, with Dalton reportedly having the stronger day during this particular practice. Healthy competition throughout the roster is exactly what the coaching staff wants, because it forces every player to earn his position every single day. The depth along the defensive front has produced encouraging signs as well. With Jonathan Greenard not practicing, other edge rushers have received additional opportunities to showcase their abilities. Jason Owe has continued dominating in camp, while Arnold Ebiketie has quietly put together an impressive stretch of practices, emerging as another pleasant surprise. AJ Epineza has also turned in strong performances, strengthening the overall depth of the edge rushing group. For a defense that relies heavily on consistent pressure, seeing multiple players step forward provides valuable insurance as camp progresses. When you put everything together, this practice tells a much more balanced story than simply saying the offense struggled. Yes, there were mistakes. Yes, there were penalties, dropped passes, and injuries that disrupted the flow of practice. But there were also meaningful individual developments, encouraging performances from young players, improvements within the new offensive system, and unexpected strengths emerging across the roster. Training camp is rarely about perfection. It is about identifying problems, correcting them, building chemistry, and discovering which players are ready to contribute when the regular season arrives. As more